Have you ever wondered what really happens when a total political outsider suddenly gets, well, immense power?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it?
Yeah, today we're looking right into the heart of Washington during the Trump administration. We're exploring the reactions, the adaptations, and maybe the motivations of people caught in that orbit.
Right, how established ways of doing things were really put to the test. You shared some great material, particularly excerpts from Mark Leibovich's Thank You For Your Servitude.
Exactly. We'll unpack the key insights there. And, for listeners interested in this kind of analysis, resources like the Mindful Moments YouTube channel could be interesting. They use AI for analysis, encouraging reflection, which is kind of what we're aiming for today.
That fits perfectly because the speed, the sheer totality of Trump's influence Leibovich describes, it's quite something.
Where do you even start?
Well, take Senator Lindsey Graham. The book paints this picture of him really seeking appreciation at the Trump Hotel, even from, Turkish businessmen or oath keepers, people with clear motives. It shows that pull Trump had.
And that hotel itself, it wasn't just a hotel, was it?
No, not at all. It became a hub, the mothership. America's living room, some called it.
Time magazine called it the Swamp Hotel.
Yeah.
Which is quite ironic given the campaign slogan.
Extremely ironic. It really became this central theater for observing the administration.
You mentioned Trump's pull. Leibovich touches on his ability, or maybe instinct, to sniff out weakness, right? Yeah. In people, even in the party structure itself.
Yes, he seemed to have this almost uncanny ability to see where the vulnerabilities were and then, exploit them.
Which brings up that classic question, doesn't it? The chicken or the egg. Was Trump just a symptom of a system already, let's say, struggling? Or did he actively use the tools of a kind of degenerating system?
It's tough to disentangle. Maybe both are true to an extent. David Brooks had that memorable line about Trump's thoughts being like 6 fireflies beeping randomly in a jar.
Yeah, it's suggesting a lack of clear ideology.
Exactly. But that randomness, maybe that was part of the appeal for some. It didn't seem to hinder his influence.
And the slogan, drain the swamp.
Leibovich points out, and it's true, that wasn't new. Nancy Pelosi had used it. There were similar ideas back in the Reagan-Bush days. It's a recycled platitude.
So maybe the more interesting story, as Leibovich suggests, isn't Trump himself, but the established figures around him, the slavishly devoted Republicans.
I think that's a crucial insight. These weren't political novices. They were making choices. The little anecdote about free desserts at BLT Steakhouse.
Sounds almost comical.
It does, but it serves as this small, kind of dark symbol of what? Loyalty, access, the little perks that grease the wheels.
And that loyalty often required some pretty dramatic shifts in public positions. Chris Christie, for example.
Oh, absolutely. He went from saying you need to punch the bully in the face to becoming, quite close to Trump. Leibovich notes this strange awe Christie seemed to develop.
It wasn't just Christie, though, was it?
Not at all. Think about Rudy Giuliani or Ted Cruz. Lion Ted suddenly wasn't so lion anymore. Marco Rubio, little Marco, also came around.
Each seemed to have their own reasons, their own maybe weaknesses that Trump tapped into.
That's how it appears. Leibovich draws a parallel, maybe a provocative one, to the Stanley Milgram experiments on obedience, the power of perceived authority figures.
That's a stark comparison. And it wasn't just the politicians adjusting. What about figures like General Milley?
Right. There were reports mentioned in the book about Milley's deep concerns regarding Trump's stability, his serious mental decline, as he apparently put it, especially the Twitter habits.
And even on something as fundamental as the election results.
The approach seemed to be, based on reporting, less about confronting the falsehoods and more about managing Trump. Giving it time, hoping it would pass.
Even when they knew the truth.
That's the implication, a strategy of avoidance.
Which maybe had its roots earlier. Leibovich talks about the summer of 2016, Republicans keeping their heads down.
Yes, a kind of collective avoidance, hoping he wouldn't win, perhaps. This foreshadowed what Senator McCain later called, quite bluntly, cowardice.
McCain seemed genuinely weary of it all.
Deeply so. Even while battling illness, he saw the calamity, as he termed it, and was dismayed by his colleagues, just kowtowing.
You see the personal toll, too, like Rubio admitting he'd vote for Trump, but, quote, not with any great joy. That says a lot.
It speaks volumes about the internal conflict. And look at the sheer contradictions. Rick Perry
called Trump a barking carnival act.
And then became his Secretary of Energy. Or Ben Carson comparing Trump to a child molester.
Before endorsing him and becoming HUD secretary, the turnaround is just Stunning.
It highlights the immense gravitational pull of power, doesn't it? And the compromises people were willing to make.
How did Trump even bring these reluctant Republicans on board initially?
Leibovich describes this charm offensive, a sort of solicitous shtick of a manager or maitre d'. Personal attention, even it's superficial, goes a long way, apparently.
Like Chris Christie's observation about Trump's approach to dictators.
Yeah, Christie suggested it wasn't complex strategy, just Trump wanted to be liked by them. A surprisingly simple, maybe naive view of foreign policy.
Meanwhile, you had figures like Reince Priebus trying to hold the party together. What a job that must have been.
Unenviable, to say the least. Trying to manage the RNC while the party's standard bearer was constantly, setting fires.
Even within the inner circle, there were doubts. Sean Spicer, for instance.
Right. Apparently hoping Trump would lose, but not so badly it cost Republicans the House and Senate. Talk about threading a needle.
And then Spicer's own experience getting yelled at over the inaugural crowd size.
And the public ridicule that followed. Leibovich's description of him ending up resembling a beaten puppy is just brutal.
It paints a picture of intense pressure and the lengths people went to manage Trump's ego, like Hope Hicks supposedly making up poll numbers.
It suggests an environment built around managing the principal's psychology as much as governing.
Which makes Mike Pence's unwavering loyalty even more striking, calling it the greatest privilege of my life. It's still kind of a puzzle, his lineman.
It really is, especially when contrasted with reports of other cabinet members.
Right, privately calling Trump an idiot, a dope. Dumb is shit, according to various accounts cited.
While publicly showing complete servitude, that gap between private talk and public performance is one of the book's major themes.
And the consequences weren't just internal. People like Stephen Miller, Kirstjen Nielsen, they faced real public harassment for administration policies.
They did. And Nielsen, interestingly, sometimes found refuge back at where else? The Trump Hotel. It keeps coming back to that place.
We also saw lines blurring constantly. Kellyanne Conway defending the Trump family's supposed financial sacrifices.
While simultaneously promoting Ivanka's businesses from the White House briefing room.
And the presence of people like Rudy Giuliani's son, Andrew, or Omarosa Manigault, with titles but seemingly unclear roles, it added to the sense of, chaos, or at least unconventional operations.
Definitely unconventional. And speaking of the Conways, George Conway's perspective is fascinating. His own wife's loyalty. He described it as joining a cult.
That's incredibly stark coming from a spouse.
It highlights the deep personal divisions this era caused.
Paul Ryan tried to navigate it too. His comparison of the Trump hotel lobby to the Star Wars bar scene.
That captures the feeling, doesn't it? Chaotic, full of strange characters. And then Senator Bob Corker's tweet.
Calling the White House an adult daycare center. Pretty direct.
Very direct.
Yeah.
But, some people thrived in that environment, like Congressman Matt Gaetz.
Oh, so.
His talent for grabbing attention, for being provocative, that seemed to be rewarded in the Trump era. He understood the new rules of the game, perhaps.
Which brings us back to the erosion of norms. Lindsey Graham again. His defenses of Trump kept shifting, didn't they?
Dramatically. From he can't collude with his own government regarding Russia to downplaying James Comey's accusations of being asked for loyalty. The justifications evolved.
And John McCain's reaction to that.
Asking Graham point blank, where's your self-respect? It's a devastating question.
Steve Schmidt had a particularly harsh take on Graham, too.
Calling him a pilot fish living off Trump's vile detritus. Strong words reflecting the intense feelings involved.
But Graham himself seemed almost to admit the calculation involved.
Yeah, basically saying he needed Trump to stay relevant. It lays bare the transactional aspect of it all.
You saw this reflected online, too, that LOL, nothing matters sentiment.
Exactly. A kind of nihilistic shrug, suggesting actions no longer had consequences, fueled by the constant churn of controversies.
It led to this outrage fatigue, didn't it? Things that would have been presidency-ending scandals before just washed over.
They did. The baseline shifted, which makes the image of the Kennedys, Clintons, Bushes, Obamas all attending McCain's funeral.
Feels like a scene from a different political universe now.
A reminder of a time with different cross-partisan norms, perhaps. This period really shifted things, and you can see that reflected in analyses like those on mindful moments, or frankly, in discussions like ours on these podcasts.
Yeah, exploring these shifts is crucial. And the period after the 2020 election, that was something else entirely.
Unprecedented. Trump's sustained effort to overturn the results, with figures like Ted Cruz amplifying the distrust.
And the pressure Trump put on Mike Pence. directly asking him to disrupt the constitutional process of counting electoral votes.
It was a direct challenge to the peaceful transfer of power, which culminated, of course,
in a January 6th rally and the attack on the Capitol.
A shocking day. And the fallout within the Republican Party was intense.
Figures like Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, taking a stand against Trump's narrative about the election in January 6th.
And facing ostracization, censure, losing primaries, it showed Trump's continued grip. Look at Kevin McCarthy.
His position seemed to change almost day by day initially, didn't it? From critical immediately after Jan 6th to
visiting Mar-a-Lago shortly after, seemingly making peace. It demonstrated where the power still resided in the party.
And even critics like William Barr,
who wrote a scathing memoir about Trump's unfitness for office,
still said he'd vote for the Republican nominee in 2024, even if it was Trump.
Which really highlights the depth of partisan loyalty or maybe antipathy towards the alternative that defines politics now. There's the sense of weariness Leibovich describes, a post-apocalyptic feel in Washington afterward.
So what are the lasting impacts? What does Trumpism mean long-term?
Leibovich suggests it involves denial and openness to lies, maybe even an encouragement of political violence. The stats are worrying.
The number of Republicans who still believe the 2020 election was illegitimate.
And the percentage, small but significant, who think political violence can be justified. It's a concerning legacy. Even the banning of Zach Everson, the reporter who meticulously tracked the business dealings at the Trump Hotel.
It feels symbolic, doesn't it? Silencing the person documenting the Swamp Hotel.
It really does. It underlines the hotel's symbolic weight throughout the whole saga.
So, wrapping this up,
yeah,
what does all this mean for you listening to this, trying to make sense of our political landscape?
Well, these sources, particularly Leibovich's book, they really show a period of intense pressure on people, on institutions. You see this constant push and pull between loyalty, ambition, principle.
Yeah, it's clear how one person's influence fundamentally reshaped a major party and how chasing power led to some surprising alliances and also deep, deep divisions.
So thinking forward, what are the long-term effects? What does this era tell us about the future of political talk, of leadership?
Good questions to ponder. To keep exploring these kinds of issues, we hope you'll subscribe to our channel for more discussions like this.
And maybe share this with others who you think might find it insightful.
If you want to read more yourself, there's a link to buy Mark Leibovich's book in the show notes.
But most importantly, just keep thinking critically. Keep questioning the forces shaping our world.